Greetings, gainers. I'm Ralphie and welcome to my channel called Fitter Philosophy, in which I discuss practical experience-based stoic stuff from a mindful, thoughtful, philosophical point of view, which really connects with practicality. And one of the ways that we can enhance our lives stoically is to acknowledge life as it really is. And it's very true, the saying that goes, life is what happens while we're busy making other plans. And another saying, which is equally as appropriate, is we all make plans in life whilst life makes plans for us. And I want to tell you the story of Arthur. Arthur was a tragic situation, and I encountered basically a cousin of Arthur's who was left to arrange his funeral. And it's only as this cousin, who was a lovely lady, it's only as she was arranging and going through his what was left of his worldly possessions that she discovered the real story around a relative that she barely knew. And as she said in her own words, she felt that in arranging his funeral and tying up his estate, she was meeting him intensely for the first time. But I'm going to tell you the story of Arthur, which is one of the funeral related stories from my book Life, Death and Whiskey that doesn't actually make it into this particular narrative because there just wasn't the space. But he had such, someone describe it as an unlucky life, and yet it was still a full life that he led. He was the only son of parents who had basically come together at the end of the Second World War just for companionship, not really a relationship. And he was born really by accident, at which point the mum and dad felt duty bound to not give him a lot of love because they weren't really those sort of people, but to make sure he was fed and watered, went to school, and basically got himself a nice quiet position in life so as he could get on with it. Back in these days, a lack of ambition was perfectly acceptable, so long as you were seen to be doing something respectable in society. And this was the case for this young man who started off training at a printer's, but grew an interest in literature and studied literature more, and then went to night classes initially, where he was studying, first of all, creative writing, but latterly literary forensics and literary research. So he was that kind of boy. Unfortunately, he was hit by a car just as he was completing his studies. Therefore, he couldn't sit his exam, and he was then diagnosed with long-term brain damage. So in fact, the intelligence that he'd clearly been showing in his ambitions was cut short simply because he'd stepped out into the road at the wrong place, at the wrong time, with the wrong situation, and the impact of the car left him intellectually disfigured. you could say that he changed. He kind of slowed down and became more pedestrian. This attracted a girlfriend who was looking for someone to care for and someone to look after. She seemed like a nice girl, but the parents really didn't check too far because they weren't that interested. And it transpired that as soon as he went to live with her, she was becoming manipulative, abusive, and gaslighting. And they never really got to the bottom of the reason why, because he wasn't communicating. He was really becoming more internal as a person. He subsequently suffered a nervous breakdown, which was blamed on the road traffic accident. And it was considered for the best by his parents and by his girlfriend that he go into residential care. He then found himself in a mental health institution. And this is in his mid-20s, where he found it very difficult to fit in and settle down. But he did have a friend who had Down syndrome, and they had a bond between them, a bond of friendship. And they looked out for each other, and they used to kind of sit alone in the public spaces where they wouldn't get alarmed by the mood swings of some of the other residents. Latterly, they both volunteered as gardeners to help with the vegetable patch and to do the weeding. They both adapted very well to that. And this was where the artist appeared. Unbeknown to, I think, most folk in this mental health institution. And we're talking about the old days, by the way, the old Victorian buildings with bars over the windows and a lot of locked closed doors and many things left unsaid. They discovered an artist who had taken a studio, essentially, in one of the garden sheds, the stone garden sheds, and who was apparently an incredibly talented sculptor, but because of mental health issues had never become established and never been taken seriously. At which point the two friends were kind of taken as part of their gardening duties. They were taken into the studio to model and to do a little bit of stone preparation for the sculpture. Now, initially that seems to have worked out very well, but unfortunately, as time was going on, primarily due to the medication that was being increased in the sculpture, he became increasingly angry and violent, and he took it out on those around him. But because of his family connections, because he came from a very wealthy landed gentry family with a lot of personal connections behind the scenes, he was allowed to get away with it. And our two friends, they were prepared to suffer it and endure it because it got them out in the fresh air and it got them away from where they perceived the trouble to be. Latterly, they were both hospitalised, physically hospitalised, from an assault that went on for too long. And although the lad with Down syndrome, being physically younger and tougher, managed to survive, Our protagonist didn't. He succumbed to his injuries. And this is after many years. His parents are long gone. There's no family contact. And then the authorities literally phone a cousin out the blue and say, by the way, you're listed in this document as a relation of such and such a person who she didn't even know existed. And therefore it's your responsibility to attend to the funeral, which technically speaking is not true. Legally speaking, it's not true. But because there was money in the estate, it was decided that she would take responsibility, which she duly did out of a sense of duty to the family. She'd heard of him briefly, but she'd been lied to and told him that he joined the foreign diplomatic corps and was over in Asia. So when she discovered that her young cousin had died of physical injuries in a mental institution in Scotland, she was shocked. When she discovered that there was in fact a case of his belongings that were basically had his name tag on it, and she just had to go up and claim it as soon as she showed the death certificate, she was shocked. When she opened the case and discovered that it had some beautiful rare old books in it that had been the few things that he'd spent money on in his life before he was institutionalized, she was shocked, because she discovered that her cousin in fact had a great intellectual mind. And yet this was his life. And whilst he in good faith made plans in his life, unfortunately life was making plans for him for all the wrong reasons and for all the wrong sentiments. And I can tell you that this isn't a rare situation. And there's no point saying it doesn't happen in these more enlightened times, because these are not more enlightened times. There are people whose lives disappear into institutions, and they rarely have their own personal life back again. You find this with people who join the military and get militarized, and it changes them as individuals. Superficially, it seems they have more self-discipline, they exercise more personal authority in their lives, but not really. They have been groomed to live their life a certain way and continue to do so, even when their circumstances change. And this is why one of the best pieces of advice we can ever give as adults to children is learn as much as you can, as fast as you can, and grow up as quick as you can to deal with life as strongly as you can. Because we should never ever forget, each and every one of us, and it applies to us all, whatever our stage in life, that whilst we try and choose to make plans in life, life makes plans for us.